Many know about slavery, but few discuss paper genocide. We did not all come from Africa, and most of us have Aboriginal roots that were stripped away due to reclassification and miseducation. As a native Black American and a member of the Muskogee Creek Nation, I understand the importance of tracing your lineage. If you want to learn how to trace your genealogy and apply for tribal citizenship, go to nativeblack.ancestry.com to schedule a consultation.
They don't want you to remember this. You not no slave, you indigenous. Fuck how they painted them Indians. You went to war with the French and the British, man. Quite frankly, you was kings, Merovingians. They took the women and men, made them prisoners, raised up the children to worship their images, set up a lab to the genes and they mixed them, and this shit get way deeper than your pigment.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, smash the like button on the way in. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Make sure to check out the website, nativeblack.ancestry.com. I've got tons of genealogical resources available for you. I've also launched my first course, Hidden Heritage, the untold story of Native Black Americans. Right now, we're doing a 50% off sale on the course from now until the 1st of the month. But guys, this is a continuation. This is a continuation of a conversation we've been having tonight with a content creator by the name Handsome History. You can find him on TikTok under the name Handsome History, as well as YouTube under the same name. And I was really hoping he'd come back for a third broadcast this evening so that we can answer some questions of the audience and, most importantly, dive a little bit deeper into our own family genealogies, because I think that there's a lot of parallels that most people don't realize. Without further ado, let's bring up our honored guest of the evening, Handsome History. How you doing?
Hey, thanks, Mike. Good to be here. Let's keep going. It's fun stuff.
Oh, yeah. Let's keep it going. Now, if there's anybody who's migrating from the last broadcast to this one and has any questions, then go ahead and post them in the TikTok feed or the YouTube live chat. I know there were several people in the chat talking about how they really love the conversation between us. They want to see more of us. Hey, if you're down to come back or even pop in once a week or something, you know, I think
absolutely, this could be fun.
It'd be great.
It's
most definitely.
There is to talk about.
Yeah. Shout out to Aquili I. Says, I feel like a kid again. Happy to be in school. There you go. Each one teach one. Craig says, lovely discussion. Stretchy on TikTok says, it's some gems in here. Appreciate both of you guys. Cool. Yeah. Let's get into it. Y'all. Let me see. Intune says, has he shared this information with relatives or colleagues? If so, what was their response?
Oh, man, yeah, that's a good question. I love that.
You know he ain't talking about this at the family reunion. No.
I think that's a great question. Hey, why not? It's a fair question, man. Yes, I have. And everybody, of course, initially, obviously, mostly white people at this point in my life. But it's like, yeah, there's like a, but here's the thing. Once I start pointing out some things, you know, and then like it kind of works on them, and then they start to open up to a little bit. You know, I'm like, have you ever thought, like, how do you explain this? And they'll be like, oh yeah, you're right. I'm like, yeah, like, don't you think what I'm saying might? And then of course, since I kind of bring a court, you know, I have experience. You know, I worked at IBM, like. I could also talk about a way a lot of these type of people like, oh, that's all right. Well, he's making a good case. Like, it's like he's making a good case for it, right? It's like, you know, it's the culture, right? It's like, okay. It's almost like I know how to like put it to them in a way that they might accept it. I guess what I'm trying to tell you, you know, with it. Yeah, I mean, obviously, most people are at a minimum like, how could you hide that? Like at some point, they're just like, but how could they have made up the lie and made it work, right? That I think is a lot of it. And then at that point, it gets pretty interesting with people. You start telling people, you know, these guys are the indigenous Indians that were here, and especially a lot of people that are, you know, Christian or whatever. And you start maybe throwing out that word like Indios and the Hebrew and all that. That's something that like resonates with them in their, especially if they're Protestants in this country, right? So they're gonna be like, wait, what? So yeah, it takes a little bit of like, kind of got to roll it out a little bit. I can't sit there and go, man, you guys are idiots. This is what really happened. That doesn't work, right? So what I got to do is be like, you know, I've been really looking at this stuff, and as you guys know, like I've always loved the history, you know. So I tell you know, they know who I am, and I'll be like, I'm telling you, man, I'm not a conspiracy guy. Like I'm not known as that guy. You know, I'm not the aliens guy. You know, I'm not the you know, I'm like, this is real. It's like what I'm trying to say. And I tell them I'm reading legislation. I'm reading corporate charters. I'm reading missionary logs. You know, I'm saying I'm not reading what the Indians are telling me. I'm not reading what the black people, because that's the blacks, right? How they say the white people go, the blacks. It's like
Yeah.
stop, please stop, right?
Oh,
Like,
you've been watching those Negroes on TikTok. No, I've been
yeah.
reading the book from the Europeans that came here and built the country.
yeah. So it's like, okay, you know, whatever. You got enough knuckleheads, they're just never going to convert. But the others, like, you know, it's interesting once they can kind of get their mind around just to consider it. You'd be surprised. Like, they're like, okay, but I think one of the biggest things is just simply like, how in the hell could they pull this off? But then I kind of go into that with people, especially around the Civil War. Because I point out to them that this is how everybody talked about it before the Civil War. A lot of what we're saying was conventional. So I said, so something happened, and we're the guys that come after, right? Especially the Europeans. They dumped so many over that weren't here before. They can
Let's
tell
touch
them
on that
whatever.
real quick.
Yeah.
Let's touch on that. I think you're actually the first content creator I heard say this verbatim. You said something along the lines of over 90% of Europeans today descend from immigrants that came after the Civil War.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd say, but I'd say at least like 50 to 70. Like, here's what I'll say. They brought over from, say, basically 1870, well, really at the war until 1920, around World War I, guys. So you're talking like 60 years of this, 400,000 to 500,000 a year. So the numbers get big real quick. Understand the South only had a total of like it was like 12 million people, like 4 million, even less than that. The country had about 30 million at the Civil War. So you start bringing over 1 million every 2 years. That's 3%. You know what I mean? My point is, those are huge numbers. And the type of people they're bringing over, half of them are from the Caucasus region in Russia, because the Russian czar is fighting. So the whole time the Indians over here are getting displaced, and there's like this insane amount of war effort against you guys. The Russians are over there doing it against the Balkans and the Caucasus region, and relabeling them all their tribes disappeared too. And then they're getting displaced and coming into Galveston, Texas. So just as many Europeans came from there as came from England, Ireland, and Scotland. Like, that's the typical thing. Although we'll all tell you, right? We're all from England, Ireland, Scotland. Right. Actually, about half of us are from, well, we don't really know, somewhere in the Caucasus. That's a whole another thing. They're just calling themselves German because they came out of the port of Hamburg. It's just like you're talking about the Dawes Act, right? The Dawes Act, They look at you and they give you a label. They did the same thing to the Europeans. They looked at them like, well, you know, he could be Syrian, he could be German. I'm serious, guys. They literally did the same thing. It's like it's wild, but it's like they're displacing everybody simultaneously and moving people around.
If anybody wants to research this on their own time, if anybody's wondering why these European settlers would come here, risk life and limb, battling Indians and stuff to try to settle, you have to look up something called the enclosure. Around the same time, around the same time, they were taking the peasants and the serfs off of communal land ownership. Guys, look it up. The average European peasant was living in, like, his house was like the size of a McMansion. I mean, sure, it's made out of wood and stuff, but they were living pretty good. But here comes the enclosure to privatize the land, force them on little land allotments, kind of echoing the whole Dawes Commission thing. And then they'd say, hey, look, life's not really looking real good for you in Europe. You ain't shit over here. You ain't never going to be shit unless you were born into the aristocracy, right? But here's a better deal for you. We'll fund you getting on this boat, and the corporation will fund you going to settle in this new colony as long as you agree to work the land for X amount of years and do this and that. And guess what? It's not until they show up in America that they realize, wait a minute, they're giving us supplies to settle, and they're giving us firearms. Why do we need guns for? Oh, yeah, there's some local Black Indians that want to kill you guys for being here. Good luck.
Man, I mean, it's, right. I've done 2 deep dives, one in California on that and one in Florida. And I mean, in Florida, it's literally in the legislation. If you got 160 acres of land, you had to be a white European. You had to come down for 5 years. All right. After 5 years, then it was like yours, and you didn't have to pay tax and cash for like 10 years after that. But here's what the kicker: you had to come to the militia muster every weekend to the armory where the Methodist judge and reverend were auditing who showed up, and that's where you got your gun. So what they were doing was basically putting armed settlers. They were just putting bodies there with guns and it's just like just putting them out there, man. And just
that's how the colony of Georgia started. They were an armed rebellion with the Spanish and the Black Indians that were, allies with the Spanish, and they were going into the Carolinas and raiding plantations and liberating slaves. So they said, we need to put up a buffer area. We need to get some ponds to start this little area of Georgia so they can be cannon fodder and kind of be in between these battlegrounds. That's how you get Georgia.
It's bad, guys. I mean, and in Florida's even later. What I'm talking about in Florida is like 1850s. So a lot of this stuff in the South, guys, is in Texas. Well, I guess that's part of the South. But this is stuff that we can see going on after the Civil War. I always tell people more colonization occurred after the Civil War than before. Yes. They had all these publicly traded, capitalized stock companies. They're all coming over here. And they're all the county. So almost every county was like a corporation, and they're just bringing in Europeans, kicking out the Indians. They're calling Negroes now, right? That's what's going on. And then the Europeans are getting paid in company script that's only good at that company store in that county. So talk about slavery, right? These guys are stuck talk about being on a reservation, right? They're on the corporate reservation in a worse system. You see what I'm saying? Like, well, obviously by that point, being black's the worst case. But what I'm saying is like, they're bringing these guys over. It's not like the story is always like, and then after 2 or 3 years, the white settler got some land, and then he went on and he built the family. I'm like, guys, that's a big lie too. They were all dying of starvation. They're paupers. They're the hobos on the trains. Those are all the white guys that they don't know how to farm, guys. They don't, and you're not going to help them. Hell no, right? You guys are doing your thing, right? Everybody's like tribing up. Imagine. So the white dude you see what I'm saying? So they're the hobos. They're the guys that are going, the vagabonds, all the way out there. Doesn't things start to make more sense now? You're like, that's who they are. Yeah.
And shout out to Oregon. Oregon says, never learned this version of Georgia history as a born and bred peach. Yeah, see, I wouldn't be surprised if they don't even really teach you that Georgia's named after King George. I'm born and raised in California. They didn't tell us the state of California is named after the quote unquote myth of the Black Indigenous Amazonian Queen Califia.
And there's a whole, well, I don't even think Georgia's named after King George. I think it's named after the Armenian Republic of Georgia, which used to be Iberia. There's a whole thing here. That's why you have guys like, you have names like Oglethorpe and Ogden establishing Georgia. Those are Caucasian names. Those are not English, Scottish, or Irishmen's names, and are even described as looking like Turks and foreigners. There's a whole story there. And Georgia's a great example too. You can find books written by the churches themselves, because you got to understand something, guys. This is all written down. Everything I'm telling you, I have found from like the horse's mouth, so to speak. So the Methodists would write these like history books and talking about their wonderful Methodist missionaries in Georgia. What they're telling you, how they hostage them, how they ran orphanages, how they converted them. They'll just tell you what happened, and because they're not ashamed of it. It wasn't illegal, and they did not think this is immoral. None of these people think anything that they were doing was immoral and it wasn't illegal. So they're writing it all out. It's just that our historians, right, the propagandists, they're not going to push it in front of a kid, right? But there's a whole great story to Georgia, guys. And if you're from there, just look up books written by the Methodists, the Baptists, these missionary books written in the 1800s. It will give you details about the intermarriages, the playing the games with the local chiefs, guys, the manipulating the women. I mean, it's real. Like, that's what I'm trying to tell you. These men that came over were not coming over with women, and they were it was part of their job. You marry an elite Indian woman, because that's how we start to get the land into our title system. Bottom line.
That's why a lot of us Black Indians find Scottish people in our family tree, some Germans, some Irish part of the family tree.
So everybody admits to that stuff because it was so they were calling him Chief McGilveray or whatever. So it's obvious. They think that's an exception. What I'm trying to say is it's the rule. It's the rule. It's way more the rule than you realize. All this intermarriage, all this hostage. Think about how many people they were hostage and indoctrinating over 100 years, 200 years. Man, it's a lot.
Yep. And shout out to Mud. Mud says, "Can we please do this talk again?" Yeah, I'm going to talk to our good brother here, and we'll try to set something up weekly or bi-weekly or something. But the audience definitely loves the conversation. And real quick, where I want to take it, Can you give us a little short synopsis on like your family history?
Yeah, let's do that.
At what point in the timeline did your family come here, et cetera, et cetera?
So I'll get it. I'll just talk about the most relevant one because two of them are after World War I, and so it's like, you know. But I do have one. The story comes out of Saxony, Germany, as like one of these military mercenary types before the Revolution. So I think they send them over. There's the French and Indian War. That's what George Washington makes his name. This is in the 1760s. And, you know, but I'm thinking that's also the Hessian soldiers, right? So I'm getting a kick out of this, like, maybe they weren't all swarthy. Like maybe my guys, it's like kind of funny because I'm like, that's so you got to understand that Hessian soldiers that you hear about and all that, and the German, that part of Germany was a Holy Roman Empire electorate, guys. So you got to understand something. This country's royal family was from the Holy Roman Empire, and they were the kings of Great Britain, but they were also the king of this electorate of the Holy Roman Empire. So just don't forget that. It's huge. These are very wealthy, powerful people, right? That's why you have an electoral college. They already had one in the Holy Roman Empire. Okay, yeah.
A lot of things, a lot of parallels.
Yeah. I mean,
it's interesting. So you said the family line of yours came from Germany?
Yeah. So that part comes over as part of this military types that they're sending. So I'm pointing this out, guys, because that's what provided the military muscle for Great Britain in the colony, besides the indigenous Indians and the tribes at the time. The guys they're bringing over from Europe are not Englishmen. They're Germans coming out of Saxony, Germany, of this electorate of King George I, II, and III, on and on. That's where King George comes from.
But when we talk about your lineage, I get the region, but were they coming over under the European settler system?
Yes,
were they coming over under the church system? Or?
Yeah, so they're coming over as part of he comes over as a Lutheran, and then they end up in New York for like a generation. And then there's like a transfer to a different Protestant denomination as they move west into Pennsylvania. Then there's the war, and there's actually a story. I can't believe it, but this is the story. They say that he was like, you know, pretty hard ass guy, and the Indians like basically had a bounty on him, and they get him after the war as he's making his way down. They kill him, but he had 4 sons that make their way to North Carolina, and that's where like the story really picks up. So they get land, and so they're getting land allocated to them from displaced Indians in the Carolinas at the end of the Civil War towards 1800 as they're moving in. And we know they start the pressure on the Cherokees starts building, right? So as they're moving you out like county by county, here come these guys they're bringing down from Pennsylvania, New York, because hey, we're going to give you guys a couple hundred. Up there you've got 40, whatever, it's crowded, whatever that means. But you know, and who are they sending down? Militaristic guys, right? Doesn't that make sense? Like they're on the frontier, right? So that's the beginning, and that's in North Carolina. Now at this point they're Methodist, and then the twist comes after the Civil War. I have one who's a prisoner of war for the South. He's, you know, actually marched back, wrote a letter. There's a whole thing where they go after their loyalty. So they have to defend themselves to the North Carolina state legislature to show that they're loyal to the new Union state of North Carolina. Okay. The whole thing, I found their name. Like, this is wild. Like, they're in there.
Well, you know, it's interesting that you say that you have ancestors who came from Germany, because some people would be surprised that I also have some lineage from Germany.
There you go.
And although his ancestors came under the displacement settler system, my German ancestor came here as a slave, more or less. Matter of fact, if I bring him up real quick, this is my seventh great grandfather. His name was Franz Christian Nehuthman. His angelicized name is Hootman. No resemblance, I'm sure. This is on my mother's side. So my father's side, maternal and paternal, Black Indigenous. My mother's paternal side, Black Indigenous. Mother's maternal side, German Irish heritage. And actually, if I pull up his profile here, check this out, guys. It gets deep. This is how deep we can get with the receipts. He's born in July 31st, 1757 in Mengerishausen, Frankenberg, Germany, right?
Okay.
Check this out. We've even got some oral tradition passed down through the family of how he came to the Americas. Let's do a little bit of reading, guys. At the end of the day, reading is oh so fundamental. Come on.
butterfly in the sky. I can go twice as high. Take a look, it's in a book, a reading rainbow. I can go anywhere.
Hey, let's talk about it, y'all. Let's talk about it, okay? We got to read. It's in a book. They didn't want us to read and write for a reason, right? This is the oral tradition right here. Christian Houtman, the founder of the Houtman family in America, was born in 1757 in the Principality of Hessen-Kassel Gremmen Empire. At that point in time, in that part of Germany, it was called the Gremmen Empire. He was a fine drummer boy, and when about 16, was kidnapped by the Prince of Hesse and sold to King George III of England to the end and for the purpose of fighting the colonists in America who were at war with the mother country, striving for their independence. Guys, my ancestor is in the Gremmen Empire, gets kidnapped by a local prince, sold to King George to go fight for the British in the American Revolution. Let's keep going. His father was a wealthy man and could have procured the young man's release, but for a difference between them, he was taken in charge by officers. And upon his refusal to join the troops, he was given 30 lashes for 3 consecutive days. They was whipping him like Toby over there in Germany. Damn. After which he consented to obey the commands of his superiors. Nevertheless, before embarking with the soldiers, he said to his father, quote, "You forced me to take the lashes. I'll go, but I'll never fire a gun against the Americans, and I will never return to the fatherland." And he never did. On the morning of December 25th, 1776, he was struck by a gun cartridge and suffered a fracture of one leg. During the early morning, General Washington and his Continentals had crossed the Delaware and surprised Rawls' camp, capturing the entire band. Christian Houtman was one of those taken by the Americans, but they treated him so well that after 3 months, he had so far recovered that he re-enlisted, but not with the British, but with the Virginian Regiment, and acted as a drummer boy until the close of the war. Come on. Interesting.
Yeah. They're from the same hive. Like, they're both coming from Hesse, Germany. They're militaristic guys coming around the same era. Like, they're sending them over, for the war. And he marries in. See, that's what I don't know about mine. Like, who did he marry? That's what, like, maybe that's what's wild. So, but they're coming from the same culture. That's wild.
But here's the thing. You being a historian of the Caucasian persuasion,
Yeah.
I really want to get your live take on something.
Sure.
A lot of times when we talk about Black Indians being racially reclassified, a lot of times people don't have this type of family history that really personalizes what we're discussing. So I shared with the audience part of my one German line, right? How they came over here as slaves, more or less, right? Taking lashes and everything, right? But now I want to talk about my Black Indigenous side of the family. Matter of fact, if you guys go to my website, nativeblack.ancestry.com, if you scroll to the bottom of the website, I've actually got a little tidbit on me and one of my prominent ancestors. This is my great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather, Thomas Jefferson Adams Harjo. He was a Creek Indian town king and the Chief Justice of the Muskogee Creek Nation. And as you can see from his photo, I mean, he's clearly a melanated man. But some people would be surprised to learn that he's listed on the Dawes Roll, the federal Dawes Roll, as a full-blooded Indian. But although he's on the Dawes Roll as a full-blooded Indian, although he's such a prominent figure that he's written about in history books, this book is called The Indian Territory, Its Chiefs, Legislators, and Leading Men, written by Harry F. O'Byrne. And right here on page 242, my ancestor has a whole chapter dedicated to him. So clearly this was a man of note. He was a leader in the tribe during a very tumultuous time. I mean, we're talking about the Chief Justice of the Creek Nation. He's a famous attorney working on behalf of the tribe, right? But I was surprised to find in modern times, there are mainstream academics working to racially reclassify my grandfather. I was so surprised to learn that there's a professor at the University of Georgia called Claudio Sant. And Claudio Sant is a professor, has a PhD in American Indian history, has tenure at University of Georgia, all this. He's in documentaries about Black Indians, trying to convince you that Black Indians are African slaves that mix with natives and shit. Claudio Sant is in the center of it all. And Claudio Sant, to my surprise, wrote a book about my ancestor, wrote a book about my whole family line. This is the name of the book: Black, White, and Indian, Race and the Unmaking of an American Family. And in this book, we got a whole chapter on my ancestors again. Let's check out what this professor with his PhD on American history says about my ancestor, who's a leader of the Creek Nation, listed on the Dawes Roll as a full-blooded Indian. Let's see how he describes him. Thomas J. Adams, a Creek of African descent. Wait a minute, my ancestor's a leader of the nation. I mean, he's a Chief Justice of the Creek Nation. He's on the Dawes Roll, not as a freedman, not as 1/2 blood quantum, 1/8, 1/30, as a full-blooded Indian. But this professor in his book that he wrote in 2005 is going to start off by saying, my ancestor is a Creek of African descent, born in 1852. Adams became the Chief Justice of the Creek Nation in the late 1800s, suggesting that some Black Muskogees still wielded significant power. So we can't hide the fact that he was the Chief Justice of the Creek Nation because he's such a prominent figure. But look how he's sneak dissing my ancestor. I guess some of these Black African Creeks have position. Why would they let an African come and be the leader of the tribe? But wait, there's more. It's going to get worse, and it's never going to get better. Thomas J. Adams, a Creek of African descent, born in 1842. Adams became the Chief Justice of the Creek Nation in the late 1800s, suggesting that some Black Muskogees still wielded significant power. Their children were visibly of African descent. Oh, we had melanin? Oh, okay. Their children are visibly of African descent, and they spoke Creek fluently. Damn, I didn't know Africans speak Indigenous American dialect fluently. Where they do that at? But it gets worse, and it's never going to get better. When I found out that this man is writing this book alleging my ancestors in African, despite him being on the Dawes Roll as a full-blooded Indian, guess what? I did what you're supposed to do. I reached out to him. And this is where it's going to get interesting. I'm so glad that we've got a handsome history up here on the stage, because I would love your personal opinion on this. Wow. I sent him an email April 16th of this year. I sent him this email, and this is what I say. Dear Dr. Sant, my name is Michael Lane, and I'm a genealogist as well as a citizen of the Muskogee Creek Nation. I am also a direct descendant of Thomas Jefferson Adams Harjo, a respected leader of our nation who served during the late 19th and early 20th century. After reviewing your book, Black, White, and Indian, Race and the Unmaking of an American Family, I came across references suggesting that Thomas Jefferson Adams was of African descent. I am writing to respectfully request the specific sources or documentation that support this claim. From the records I've studied, he is listed on the Dawes Roll, roll number 2145, as a full-blood Creek citizen, not as a freedman. He also served as Chief Justice of the Creek Nation Supreme Court and was a long-standing member of the National Council, all while being recognized as a leader chosen by and respected within the nation. Nowhere in federal or tribal archives have I seen any indication that he was categorized as having African ancestry. As someone deeply invested in preserving the truth of our history, and as a Creek citizen working to correct the long legacy of racial reclassification and historical misrepresentation, accuracy on this topic is incredibly important to me, and to others reclaiming their Native identity and ancestral rights. If your statement is based on verifiable lineage, I would truly appreciate the opportunity to review the source. If not, I kindly ask that you consider revisiting or clarifying that assertion in any future publications or commentary. Thank you for your time and the scholarship you've contributed to Indigenous history. I look forward to hearing from you and welcome any further dialogue on this matter. Sincerely, Michael Lane, citizen, Muskogee Creek Nation. And to my surprise, guys, I didn't think he was going to respond to me. He's some big wig professor. You know, I didn't think he was going to give me the time of day. Not only did he respond, he responded expeditiously. I sent him this email April 16th, 3:16 p.m. He responded first thing in the morning, April 17th. First thing, next day, April 17th. He says, Dear Michael, Thanks for your email. Though it has been 20 years since I last dug into the story of the Graysons, I was able to locate the two sources that I cite on the pages in Black, White, and Indian that discuss Chester Adams, a descendant of Thomas Jefferson Adams. I am attaching them to this message. Now, this is where it's going to get tricky, guys. Like Thomas Jefferson Adams himself, his wife Mahala was on the by-blood roll, though Mahala's mother was described as a very ignorant old Negro woman by a U.S. probate attorney in 1916. Let's stop right there. I asked this motherfucker why you call him my ancestor an African when he's not an African. He's listed on the Dawes Roll as a full-blooded Indian. He's a leader of the Muskogee Creek Nation. And the first piece of evidence he's going to give me is that my grandfather's wife's mother was called an ignorant old Negro woman by a probate attorney in 1916. So I guess my grandfather's an African now, guys. But wait, it gets worse, and it's never going to get better. He then goes on to say, as for Thomas, he is consistently described as a half-breed, along with other half-breeds like John Grayson, who appear on the Freedmen roll. Let's pause right there. So now he's telling me some loose rumor that my grandfather's described as a half-breed. He doesn't name the source. He doesn't name where that's coming from. He heard from a bird that even though my father is the town king, the chief justice, prominent lawyer, he heard from a bird that he's a half-breed, like another half-breed named John Grayson, who's on the Freedmen roll. But my grandfather's not on the Freedmen roll. He's on the by-blood roll as a full-blooded Indian. But wait, it gets worse, and it's never going to get better. He then says, and then there is the photo that Chester Adams shared with me. He's referring to this photo that he put in his book. So I guess he saw this photo of my famous Black Indigenous town king grandfather in the front. This is the Okmulgee courthouse. He's in the front like leaders are, posing for the photo. I guess this photo proves my ancestor is African, huh, guys? He heard that Thomas's wife's mother was described as an ignorant old Negro, so Thomas is African. He heard a rumor that he's a half-breed like other half-breeds on the Dawes Roll, even though Thomas is on the by-blood roll as full-blooded Indian, but he's an African. And Chester shared this photo, and this photo clearly shows that Thomas is an African, right, guys? But it gets worse, and it's never going to get better. This is how he ends this email to me. This is how he ends the email. But all of this is circumstantial, and you may have more definitive evidence in hand. What the fuck? Huh? I asked you to cite your sources. You have no sources. You have speculation. You have rumors, hearsay. Then you invalidate all your sources and say they're circumstantial and pass me the baton saying that I probably have more definitive evidence in hand? What? Whoa. And this is how you know that he was doing this nefariously, that this was purposeful, that the reclassification of Black Indigenous prominent leaders is going on by design, because you know what? I sat on this for several months. I didn't respond to him right away. It took a long time for me to sit with this and figure out how I would respond. You can see right here, I sent him the first email April 16th. He responded April 17th. I didn't send him another email until August 12th. I had to wait 4 months. I had to sit on it. This is crazy. But I said, you know what? Even though he's already given me a smoking gun, even though his response has already clearly proved the racial reclassification of Black Indigenous people, right? Let me just play ball with him and send him a little email seeking rectification and see what he says. So this is what I send him in August. Dear Dr. Sant, I hope this message finds you well. I've been meaning to respond to your email from April, but I wanted to take this time to sit with this matter before writing back. It's been weighing heavily on me and my family for months now. As someone who deeply appreciates historical scholarship, I want to say up front that I'm a fan of much of your work. See, guys, this is where you got to butter them up. Black, White, and Indian, West of the Revolution, and Unworthy Republic have left strong impressions of me. See, guys, he's writing all these books about American Indian history at the same time reclassifying Indigenous people, right, guys? But we're trying to butter him up. They've all left a strong impression of me. On me. Your research and storytelling have contributed greatly to public understanding of American history. That said, I also want to share that the way my ancestor, Thomas Jefferson Adams Harjo, was represented in your work has been extremely difficult for me to reconcile, both personally and professionally. In my own work as a genealogist, tribal member, and historical preservation advocate, I spend every day uncovering and correcting misrepresentations of Indigenous people, especially those of us whose identities were altered or erased in official records. I spent months reflecting on how best to approach this. I would like to resolve it in a way that is fair, collaborative, and respectful of your body of work. For my family and community, the most meaningful form of rectification would be 1, a formal professional letter of acknowledgement stating the Dawes Roll designation and clarifying that it was not included in the original work. Because guys, notice how he writes a whole fucking book about my ancestor, says he's visibly African, but doesn't mention that he's listed on the Dawes Roll as a full-blooded Indian, but is sprinkling all these misnomers about him being an African, visibly African, right? So again, first point of rectification, a formal professional letter of acknowledgement stating the Dawes Roll designation and clarifying it was not included in your original work. 2, a personal copy of the book with this clarification included, whether as an inserted page, a signed note bound in, or another method you feel is appropriate. This would allow me to preserve your acknowledgement as part of my family and tribal historical record, and to share it as an example of how historical scholarship can respond to new or overlooked information in a responsible way. I truly believe we are on the same side in wanting the historical record to be as accurate and honest as possible. I'm hoping we can work together towards a resolution that honors both the truth of the archival record and the importance of your scholarship. Thank you for taking the time to consider this. I look forward to hearing your thoughts. Guys, first email I sent him, August 16. He responds back first thing next day, April 16th. He responds back the next day, April 17th. I wait a few months. I send him this email seeking rectification, right? Right? Guys, it's now October 24th. He's not responding to my email. I don't know, guys. I guess I asked for too much. It's not like I asked for his books to be taken off the shelf. It's not like I went to the University of Georgia and started raising hell with all of my subscribers. It's not like I got with the attorneys of my tribe and the cultural preservation department to go after him academically and professionally. I didn't do any of that. I just asked for a signed acknowledgement and a copy of the book so I can preserve his correction of the record. And he wouldn't even give me that. But he's going to allege that my ancestor's an African, despite him being on the Dawes Roll as a full-blooded Indian. So when you guys hear about paper genocide, when you hear about racial reclassification, you see why I'm so passionate about this, because I live it, and my ancestors have as well. But Handsome History, let us know, what do you think about this?
Well, I mean, yeah. I'm amazed. So this is crazy. So again, this shows it's very targeted, right, at certain group of people that there's obviously we can't give like they just don't want, you know, like the cat let out of the bag or whatever. It's amazing to me that this still goes on, except it's not really amazing, because that's what I'm saying. Like when people ask, well, how could you cover this up? How? I'm like, well, if you go back a little bit, you have one group wins that war, and they're gonna choose all the Harvard University guys, look what happens now. Like when they were protesting Palestine on the college campuses, who withdrew their money? The capitalists. So once you realize that the same guys that own the media really own the universities, own this guy, we go find out who sponsors his professorship. It's going to be sponsored by a wealthy alumni or a corporation. So you ask yourself, how does this happen? Well, that's who he works for, whether he actually understands it in that dynamic or not. And he's trusting every little book, every little professor that said the same thing. When they see the word Negro, they think African. And that's part of the crazy cleverness of the whole, what they've done. Like they started that like 100, years ago in the 1800s, they start to work that in, right? And now they don't even have to, like the lie just gets passed on. Like I said, he's never even quite, man. I mean, he's, he might even, but he's probably so, but he might be a bad guy. I don't know. But at a minimum, he's embarrassed because, right? He's so, right. But on the other hand, he's probably like, well, who's ever looked that up to like, you see what I'm saying? Like every history professor he's ever had would have said the exact same thing. But, a Negro means, yep, it's that bad. It just
hold on. Respectfully, you're low key giving him a cop out. This isn't just a professor. This is a PhD. He has a doctorate. He's written several books about American Indian history. That book was a deep dive on my whole family bloodline. And guess what? In his research, he had to have came across Dawes Roll documents and knew that he was listed as a full-blooded Indian and still chose to admit that and allege he was African.
Yeah, see, that makes it, man, and it just shows you too, like, so people say to me, like, well, what are you, all this? I'm like, see, a guy can write a book, and because it's so dense and so full of footnotes, it's like a spell. Everybody just assumes everything he's writing is true. So that's why I say, no, like, I don't even play. I'm like, at the end of the day, you get a few clues. Like, yeah, I have a clue on the Dawes Roll listed as this. I have another clue, like some old lady referring to the, in a dickhead way, like, okay. But if you have any sense of the system, like if you're a real PhD student and you studied actually this system in place, you wouldn't even come to Africa has nothing to do with either one. But you see how it's like built into his head to look. It's like to look for Africa. It's like you know what I'm saying? It's like that bad. It's like, yeah. So it's bad scholarship. It's like, it's kind of like the corporate science.
Nefarious.
It's like the corporate
it's
science.
Bad scholarship. It's nefarious.
Yeah,
it's targeted and it's nefarious.
Yeah, it's pernicious and nefarious. Like it just creeps in. It's analogous to our corporate science, right? That it has an agenda, and that's it. Once you realize how many these agendas exist, like again, look who's funding the universities. Like, there's no way a guy. I mean, I can't imagine what university you could be employed in respectfully and have a long-term career and stand up and start talking about this stuff. And don't even think it's going to be at an HBCU because those are all co-opted after the Civil War, created by the Rockefellers. I mean, again, follow the money. Like whoever's funding.
Oh no. I've come in contact with several professors who know Black Indians exist, who know about the research, and they have said verbatim, we cannot come out with this. We need you guys to keep doing your independent research and keep compiling it, because if we ever came out with this, when we ever come out with this, the pressure from this is the first time I heard this phrase. This professor said verbatim, the pressure from the academy is going to be overwhelming.
I mean, I mean, I feel like I don't want to be too judgmental. Like they want to make their money and preserve their careers, but you see how everybody takes the path of least resistance because you're on a money-based economy. Like the fix is in, guys. The point is like the fix was in about 300 years ago, and like we're all sitting here. Like at some point, it's like. That's why I like to study the indigenous civilizations, but how are you guys doing stuff before it all got mucked up? And you start seeing like how it's done. You're like, the only way you're going to get that is you got to there ain't no way they're not going to let that happen in this system. So that's a fact. So that's what everybody's up against as this gets out. So what are the implications for all this knowledge eventually? You know what I'm saying? Eventually what are, maybe 20 years from now, what are we going to do about it? Because that's what it's going to come down to. We know how these guys operate. Pete Hegseth, Don Rumsfeld, Norman Schwarzkopf. Those are knights. They're from the same families. They're not giving it up easily. Think about that's why they really would rather not even because they always want peace and friendship.
Hold on. We have to realize something though. We have to realize something. There's two different kinds of professors. There's the professors I have come in contact with who say, hey, Mike, we know about it. We can't talk about it. Our livelihood will be at risk. We don't want to risk the bag. And I get that. Yeah. I can respect it to a degree. But then there's the other type. There's the professor. There's the professor like Claudio Sant, who this has nothing to do with your job. This has nothing to do with being a university professor at Georgia State, but you're going out of your way to write several books about American Indians, to reclassify American Indians. This is how, guys, I'm telling you, you would think this is a conspiracy. In the early 2000s, Claudio Sant was in the middle of a marketing wave where they were trying to convince us that Black Indians are Africans that mix with Native Americans. Check this out. At the same time he wrote that book, Reclassifying My Ancestor, he was a part of one of the most famous Black Indian documentaries to date. It was called Black Indian, An American Story. They had Tina Turner in it, James Earl Jones. They had a bunch of famous celebrities in it. And I wonder if we look at this Black Indian American Story documentary, I wonder if we see a familiar face somewhere. Whoa, I wonder if we can put a face to the name. First of all, let me show you how the PSYOPs works. Look at how they open up this documentary. Look at how they open it up.
For some Indians, identifying as Native or Black has become complicated due to the issue of slavery. For example, Cherokees...
And you know what? I apologize. This is some clip someone took on YouTube of the documentary. Let's go to the full documentary film. Hold on, y'all. It's on YouTube for free. Unless they didn't take it off since Mike's been exposing their ass. Check this out, y'all. If anybody wants to find it, here it is. Black Indians, An American Story with Tina Turner in 2004. And look how they open it up. Watch. It got James Earl Jones in the background with his deep-ass voice, Darth Vader, right? Watch this.
They are called Black Indians. And theirs is one of our great unknown American stories. To most Americans, they are a people without a valued or clear history.
Look at the PSYOPs. They got Mufasa up here narrating. They got the Lion King up here narrating with the deep voice. Look how they're trying to draw you in.
Feel the dream. Feel the dream.
Many prominent Americans throughout our past have shared this blended African and Native American ancestry.
Oh, I got it.
Right over you.
So this is a propaganda piece to convince us that Black Indians are a mixture of African and Indian. Oh,
yeah, man. It's that bad.
Maybe that's why if you keep watching the film, they'll do some interviews with some indigenous people and check out this Black Indian man. They have to call him African American / Mohawk / Blackfoot. See how he's African first? Right? Here's another speaker, Dennis Hazard. See how he's an African American / Narragansett? See how he has to be an African first? Right? This sister right here, Gabrielle West. She has to be African American / White Mountain Apache, right? Guys, it's a running theme. Richard, he's an African American / a Narragansett, right? But when we get to the complexion for protection, Pink Belly Linda is just a Wampanoag. Oh, and I wonder if we see a familiar face.
Before the Pilgrims came,
it's quite clear that from the first arrival, from the first time that Africans set foot in the Americas, they were intermingling with Native Americans.
Who's this, guys? Dr. Claudio fucking Sant, the same one who's reclassifying my ancestor. The first thing he says in this is it's very clear since the early days that Africans were mixing with natives.
It's the fix, man.
So now you see how the fix is in. This is in 2004. He writes the book on my ancestors in 2005, and he didn't think that 20 years later, his lineal descendant would come to challenge him.
I mean, University of Georgia, between the hedges.
Hey. Is it any surprise that this is what the academics at the University of Georgia do when we know that Georgia was founded as a buffer zone to help quell the Spanish so that the British can spread out and claim more dominion? I mean, I guess I'm not surprised that this is what the University of Georgia does. Okay. Okay. And what did I ask him for? What did I ask him for? Just an acknowledgement, copy of the book. I'll be on my way. And I couldn't even get that. But you know what? We're going to be wrapping up this broadcast in about 10 minutes, maybe 8 minutes. So if anybody has any questions for Handsome History, if anybody has any questions for me, go ahead and post them in the chat. We'll try to answer as many as we can. But guys, I share this personal history with my family and this racial reclassification and everything because I was just like you. I was born as an African American, believing that we come from Africa, but always hearing oral tradition in my family of indigenous roots. And then when I start to research American Indian culture, I find that that's synonymous with our culture and how I was raised along the river and canoes and going to the lakes. My father had a scholarship in college for lacrosse. When you learn that lacrosse is an indigenous ball game, I mean, you start connecting the dots. But I share all of this to say, if my famous Black indigenous ancestors being racially reclassified like this in modern day by a mainstream PhD holding academic, then what are they going to do to your ancestors? If my ancestor is the Chief Justice of the Creek Nation, is a tribal town king, listed on the Dawes Roll as a full-blooded Indian, what are they going to do to your ancestors who maybe don't have tribal citizenship, who've maybe been reclassified for centuries, absorbed into free people of color, mulatto, Negro, freedmen populations? I mean, guys, now you see why I have such vigor, such tenacity when it comes to this subject. You know, shout out to Dr. Adams in the TikTok chat. He was saying something earlier about how can he get access to the course. All you got to do is go to my website, nativeblack.ancestry.com, click on the tab that says new course, and you can check it out. It's 50% off until the 1st of the month. This is 2 years in the making. This is the first course I've ever put together, 50 modules, each module a video 10 to 20 minutes in length. So yeah, if any of you guys want a more compartmentalized, formulaic approach to learning this, definitely check it out. But yeah, I also saw some people. I also saw some people in the chat talking about how how they love our conversations. So somebody, I think it was Mud. They say y'all need to do a weekly show.
All right.
I appreciate the feedback. I appreciate it. Hey, this is how you guys can help me get Handsome History back for a weekly show. This is what you can do. If you're on TikTok, you find him on TikTok. You go follow him, Handsome History. If you're on YouTube, go follow him, Handsome History. I bet you if he wakes up in the morning and he sees that his subscriber count went up, then maybe that'll be even more motivation to come over here and come back to the cookout, okay? Y'all better go over there and subscribe. But yeah, while we wait to see if we have any questions, let me see. Yeah, Handsome History, I'm going to give you the floor. Go ahead and provide us some closing remarks
on your story, because again, it shows how the propaganda and how this works, right? I mean, so like Mike was saying, so imagine it's 1890 and they're coming out to your ancestors, you know what I mean? And yeah, they're label me whatever you want, please just don't, right? And then imagine, you know, now, and they're writing the new history. I mean, who's going to oppose it? What the freedman chief is going to, you know, no, so they start writing it at Harvard, and they start writing it. You see it, you can read books, like you see a book from the 1880s afterwards, you see it like, wow, they're just making stuff up at this point about, you know, and so that's here we are 140 years later. And it's really only the last 20 years since us regular people through the internet, and for whatever reason, you want to talk about like an investigation I want to do, is who allowed Google and Microsoft to go around the world and scan in all these books? Because I don't think they realized that they were going to be releasing a lot of information that had been buried in basement libraries at universities and castles and estates for like centuries. You know, really, I think it's odd. So here we are, and it's only because, so like if Michael couldn't actually see a printout or a record of the Dawes Roll, he would just be stuck on believing. See, they had such control of the information for for like 100 years or more. And it's only because we're getting for some reason, this access to sources ourselves that we're even like really having these conversations. So that's how it can happen. That's why it is very believable that yes, they really told a story, started saying everybody's from Africa. Before that, they started, you know, there was a plan to start calling Indians Negro, like that. That's on purpose. Like they collaborate. Hey, this is our policy. I just want to say, as you're looking at stuff, the Catholics, the Protestant, They're ultimately in the same league, playing by the same rules. And what I like to say is they are honoring each other's checks. So everything we're reading about is between them is internecine warfare, like among the 32 NFL teams, so to speak. But they're all playing by the same NFL rules with the same NFL referees. You get my drift? So they're all doing all the stuff we've talked about, Catholic, various Protestant denominations, North or South America. They're all doing the hostage, and and this was all known. So then the question becomes, well, how come guys like, this historian and just really all the others I've never heard anybody talk about this hostaging system, and it's like literally like the normal. So yeah, they can, the lies are real, and there's a way to do it. And most people, once they're in a situation like a professor, how do you get promoted, right? You're not going to get promoted pushing against what the corporations and the wealthy families that fund all these universities want you to say, because then people start asking questions, or that's already what's happening, right? That's already starting. So yeah, I mean, actually, I think it's just an interesting tidbit there. That's actually, I think, exactly shows what's been going on in this professor. I'm not, obviously he's not doing the right thing, but it also just shows like people stay in lockstep because they're they're either part of the team, or it's a mix of being a real believer, plus they want to protect their own personal money, right? And then they got them. They got all these guys. So I just want you to understand how, I don't want to say it's easy and simple what's gone on. I think it's actually very complex, and it's very clever. I think Mike was using the word, right? It's pernicious, or it's like it just sort of crept up on everybody, right? And so I just want to that's all on that. But I just think that's a fascinating story because it encapsulates what we're talking about with the propaganda. I just wanted one thing to talk about real quick is I just want to emphasize the conversion and the spiritual warfare. I've been doing a lot more do deep dives on learning more about it, guys. I'm telling you, it might sound crazy, but I mean, it really looks like these guys were masterful at this. And yes, they it's like you combine targeted violence with this, pouring it on like we're like you. It's very
well. You know what? Hold on just a second.
Yeah.
You're touching on a very profound topic. I think what we're going to have to do is when we do our next collab together, we'll make the topic on the spiritual warfare.
Yeah,
because I know that you know what this right here is.
Wait, can I this? I can't.
Wait, hold on. I'm gonna put this on the big screen.
Wait, what is? Oh, that's a dragon, right?
That's not just a dragon. What is it? Come on, I've seen you talk about it in your videos.
Wait, that's not
Waxacodal.
Oh yeah, quite yeah, Waxacodal. Yes.
Waxacodal, yep.
Yeah, it's so it's there's crosses in Quebec, guys, like 1740s, and the Jesuits describing what he sees, and he says 15 by 15 foot wooden crosses along this ancient Indian highway leading up to the palace. Okay. And the Indians are so I'm imagining to myself, those were already there. But here's what's twisted to show you the conversion process already happened. I'm sure the Indians used to put like first fruits. They went hunting, right? You know what they're putting after like 20 years with the Jesuits in their minds? They're laying down nails. They're laying down like all the stuff about the death and the crucifixion and the violence. And they're putting roosters on top. All
right, hold on. We have to end it there. Okay, I try to keep it under 59 minutes.
End it at that.
If you can, after we wrap up, hang out on StreamYard for a moment, and I'll debrief with you. But guys, make sure to check him out. Handsome History on TikTok, Handsome History on YouTube. He will be back. Check out the replays if you missed it. We did 3 broadcasts tonight, and we'll see you later.
They don't want you to remember this. You not no slave, you indigenous. Fuck how they painted them Indians. You went to war with the French and the British, man. Quite frankly, you was kings Merovingians. They took the women and men, made them prisoners, raised up the children to worship their images, set up a lab to the genes and they mixed them, and this shit get way deeper than your pigment.